America's Army is a game where the good guys always win and the bad guys always lose, no matter what.
Become a member of the world's premier land force, trained and equipped to achieve decisive victory anywhere. Earn the right to call yourself a soldier, letting the enemies of freedom know that America's Army has arrived.
Developed and published by the US Army in 2002, America's Army was a recruitment tool intended to teach hopefuls about the enlistment and training processes and ultimately war itself.
And a muzzle reference sensor on the muzzle end. Additionally, there are 2 machine guns mounted on the top of the tank.
It had a multiplayer mode where squads would face off intense, strategy-oriented matches set in Middle Eastern battlefields. This was, of course, straight-up military propaganda, as often openly admitted by its developers, and needing to positively represent its publisher, it did one really interesting and unique thing you don't often see in games. It made the US Army always win. How it did this was by making both sides the American team, at least from their own perspectives. When you look down at yourself, you'd be decked out in Uncle Sam's standard issue, but to your enemies, you'd look like a Taliban or Russian soldier. America's Army not only model swapped to achieve this, but also changed voice and sound effects so that, from either perspective, you were always the good guys and you were always fighting the bad guys. If an enemy Marine peeked around a corner, you'd see a rebel soldier. If you fired your M16, they'd hear an AK-47. That's all I have to say about that. I'm going to talk about Splatoon now. Wow. Wink, wink. Splatoon is a family-friendly shooting game where humanoid squids fire ink at each other with retrofitted water guns. In its main mode, Turf War, players compete for territory by physically painting it. Whichever team's color covers most of the map after 3 minutes wins. Color is really important to the game's design. At a glance, you should be able to tell whether an obstacle, item, or character is aligned with your team or the enemy. The game accomplishes this using near-opposite color pairs, matchups between paints that contrast heavily, usually one warm and one cool. This design rule makes it easy to read the game. There are even colorblind settings that let users stick with static opposite spectrum colors. The exceptions are Splatfests. Once every few months, the game would make players vote on some arbitrary issue, like what's better, cats versus dogs, hamburgers versus pizza. Over the following weekend, teams would battle it out, representing their cause and earning collective prizes and bragging rights. Each team would be locked into one color for the whole fest, but occasionally the designers would break from opposites and choose ones that matched thematically, like mayonnaise versus ketchup or chicken versus egg. The game's matchmaking had a very hard time during Splatfests. For example, if you voted no pulp, like over 67% of other fucking losers, then there were 2/3 fewer opponents for the servers to set you up against. You'd be sat in lobbies waiting forever. The game's solution? Mirror matches. When matchmaking times out trying to find real opponents, it pits you against your own team in a zero-sum round. You face off against players you have no beef with, purely to keep everyone entertained. It's a waste of time. And to show that this isn't a real Splatfest match, the game reverts to generic color pairs like the regular mode. You're no longer fighting for a cause. There's no point wearing your team's stripes if neither you nor your opponents are actually ideologically opposed. If everyone here likes pulp, we've got no problems. From each player's perspective, Splatfests have good guys and bad guys. Infighting is meaningless. It's not worth pushing your own colors onto your own allies' turf. If the game didn't do this, say Splatoon handled mirror matches by always making you sport your allegiance's color and paint swapping the other team to look like an opposing force who they aren't, then what would it be saying? My read would be that what differentiates good guys from bad guys isn't their values, actions, or character, but rather the side and color they spawned in on. It doesn't matter whether you actually like pulp. If you look like you don't, you're a bad guy. An act of valor is an act of treachery if done in the wrong skin and from the wrong side. Any bad you do is justified if you're the good guy, and any good you do is wrong if you even look like the bad guy from the other guy's point of view. The game won't let them see it any other way. Good guys always win, the bad guys always lose. The game's designers would be admitting that enemies are only that in relative terms. In fact, from their eyes, your enemies are literally skinned as the good guys. Thankfully, Splatoon, a game for children, is mature enough not to make this mistake.